unboxing the January 2022 card kit from Simon Says Stamps, and then I'm going to make 4 cards with the products that are in the kit. So here we go. We're going to unbox all of these little goodies. Love this kit every month. First off, we have 2 self-sealing envelopes, and we also have the little sucker that comes in every kit. We have some pink gems. These are self-adhesive. Then we have Seafoam Glitz Glitter Gel. I can't wait to show you how that stuff is amazing. Next up, we have one of the thick embossing folders, and this is called FACETED Snowflakes. And then there is 12 pieces of 6x6 double-sided paper. This is from La La Land Crafts, and it's called Starry Night. There's all kinds of stars and stripes and plaids, all in kind of fun winter colors, blues, teals, pinks. So great for backgrounds, also for lining your envelopes with these pretty cards. All kinds of things you can do with them, and my 4th card uses that as a background. And next up, we have the stencil for this month. It's a 6x6 called Scattered Snowflakes, and we'll be using that with the Glitz Glitter Gel in a couple of minutes. There's 4 pieces of cardstock, soft navy, dull pink, lavender, and white, and then there's a 6x8 exclusive stamp set, and of course it's called Warmest Wishes. I'm going to jump in with the stencil and using the Glitz Glimmer Gel. You'll see that I cut the top off of the stencil Jello pack. I like to keep those because it keeps my stencils from getting tucked into each other when I store them. And I have attached a piece of 4x5¼ white hammermill cardstock onto a scrap of paper so that I can move it around easily on my work surface. I'm putting pixie spray on the back of the stencil before I secure it down over top of my cardstock, and then I'm going to use some very well used Post-it note tape. I love this stuff, and just go all the way around to secure it. So getting the gel open. This has glitter in it, so I had a bunch of stuff stuck on the side, so I'm just kind of mixing it up, making sure that it's all in there and nicely blended. And then I'm going to pick up a goop of it, and I am going to start spreading it across my stencil. Now, you don't need a whole bunch. You'll see that I do almost 99% of the stencil with that one blob that I stuck on there. And just pull it down and then pick it up and move it to the next space, working your way from one side to the other and then all the way down to the bottom, trying to get a nice even coat. And I'm using a metal spatula for this. It's kind of my favorite tool for these. And I'm just going back and picking up any glomps that I have, trying to get this as even as possible. I do run out right here and add a tiny little bit more. This stuff is beautiful. It's the prettiest green. You're just going to love it. And there we go, we're finished with that. So clean off your putty knife right away. And what I'm going to do is put some press and seal over top of this. I find that anytime I open one of these gels or the paper glazes, say from Picket Fence, I always like to put this over top. It stops them from drying out. And that way I get much more use out of them. So removing all my protective surfaces, I'm going to take this off, and then I'm going to go and clean this stencil right away. I'm going to set this piece aside to dry, and we're going to go on to a new card. So next up, we're going to stamp a whole bunch of the elements. I have a half a sheet of hammermill in my MISTI, and that's 5.5 by 8.5. I'm going to stamp all of the snowmen, and all of the trees, because those are going to be my main elements for my cards. And I end up doing 2 of these, but I actually only show you that I do 1, and I color 2 as well. And I think I only had 2 snowmen left over. So you'll need 2 of these if you're going to make all 4 of my cards today. So I'm using a Gina K black ink for this. This is the amalgam ink, my ink of choice when I'm doing water copic marker coloring. Okay, so here's the colors that I chose for today, and I will post a picture on my blog. I chose these first and then went through, and you'll see that I don't use them all. When I get to the smaller images, I quite often only use a light and a medium color when I'm doing my coloring, but I did throw a dark into each one of the color combinations, just in case you want to darken it up a little bit when you're doing your coloring. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to do a bit of close-up coloring. There's two ways of adding your shadows. You can either do the dark color first or the dark color second. For the coat, I'm going to do the dark color first, so I'm starting with the B97, and I'm just going around and I'm going to do the outside edge of her coat, because that's kind of where the shadows are going to be. And then I'm going to come back in with B95, which unfortunately I don't think I show you the lid, but this is the lightest color in this color blend. And I'm going over top of the dark as well as flooding the entire area of the coat, and that's just blending the colors together. And then I'm going to go back over it once again with this lighter color, again the B95, just to even out any lines and any blending. There we go. So next we're going to move on to the turquoise, and that is in her scarf and in her hat, and these are BGs. So I'm coloring in with the lightest color this time, the BG53, and then I'm going to come in with the BG57 and do my darker outline. So this is kind of my preferred way of doing it. There is no right or wrong. You can use either one of them. I just find that using the lighter color first and then putting the darker color in allows me to blend the darker color a little bit easier than putting the dark color down first and then trying to really saturate it with the lighter color to move it around a little bit. My personal preference. Lots of people color the other way. So as I said, there's no right or wrong. It's your own personal preference. So I've got my outline done. Now I'm going to go back in with my BG53 and I'm going to blend those colors together. She's such a cute little girl. I ended up using her on the very last card. I thought she deserved a card of her own. She's so sweet. And I like these two color blues together. I think they go really well together. And they also coordinate with one of the papers that I chose out of the card kit. Okay, so we just did her little mitt there as well. Now we're going to come in with some pinks, and I'm starting with the RV55, and again, this is my lightest color. And these spots are so small that you really don't need to add any second colors for blending if you don't want to. I do show you that I add a little bit of an outline here just in a sec. I'm also going to do her cheek in this color, and I'm going to do the border of her hat and her coat, every second one, so that it's kind of pink and white stripes. And her little pom-pom. Isn't she sweet? And her buttons. Pink's kind of the highlight color, so I'm adding it as much as possible because I really want to brighten it up, because the pattern paper that I chose for the background is very light, so I really want her to pop. Okay, so my shadow color is RV17, which is my medium pink, and again I'm just going back in and adding a few little shadows. And because the light pink, the RV55, was probably not even dry, I'm not even blending them. So I'm going in for the nose. This is RY04, and this is the lighter color. And then I'm coming back in with RY09 to add the shadow, and then blending back in with the 04. And now I'm going into the grays, and I am using C1, C3, and C5. And again, I'm starting with the lightest color, the C1, and I'm going in and adding my shadows, coming back in with the C3. This is the darker color, so I'm going right over top of the 1, and it's going to help blend it in instead of it just sitting in one big blob on my picture. Now I'm coming back in with the C1, and I'm going to blend that back in. So it gives a nice shadow without it being really, really obvious. Okay. Next, we're going to do trees, and I decided to do G21, G24, G28, and they'll come into focus eventually. There you go. My camera doesn't like white on white, so it has a problem before things are colored. I'm going to start with this little tree, and I'll show you the first variation where we're going to use all three, and we're going to shadow what's closest to the trunk of the tree. So I'm starting with my G21, and I'm filling in the entire picture. And I'm probably not doing a really good job because I'm trying to color fast. Then I'm going to come back in, and I've got the G24, and I'm going to add some shadows. So basically underneath where another branch would be, where it would be a little bit darker if you were actually looking at it and the sun was shining down on it. And again, we're going to go to the darkest color, which is the G28, and add just a tiny, tiny little bit more shadow in the deepest, darkest areas. Now you can go back over that with the G21 if you want to, but I think my ink was wet enough that it kind of blended all by itself. Here's the second version. I'm flooding the whole tree with the G21. But then I'm just going to come back in and I'm going to flick using the flicking technique with the G24. And this time I'm going to go from the bottom or the end of the branch in towards the trunk just to add a little bit of a secondary color. Okay, so here's the second color. This is the G24. And you see, I'm just going to flick from the tips back in. And I'm only really good at flicking one way, so I turn my paper around so that I can flick the other way. Otherwise, I find I don't get the right arch in it. And that's why I like to go with smaller pieces of paper when I'm working so that I can turn my paper. Okay, so there we go. Here's all the different ones that I have colored, and there's close-ups on my blog of the cards so that you can get the colors that I used. Okay, next we're going to create a background, another background with the stencil. So this is the Scattered Snowflake stencil that came in the kit. Again, I'm putting down a piece of white hammer mill. I'm securing my stencil over top. This time I'm using the Spellbinders tape. And I find this a little bit too sticky, so you'll see I put it on my clothes. It picks up a bit of the lint off my clothing and makes it not quite so sticky before I use it on my paper. I've had a couple of tears, but I do like this tape. Just be cautious of how sticky it is. The colors I'm using today are the new Positively Saturated inks from Simon Says Stamps, Seafoam, Taffy, and Bubblegum. And as you can see, I'm starting with Seafoam. And I'm starting my sky at the top, but I'm angling it down a little bit on the right side. I don't like going straight across and you end up with these funky lines. I like to kind of pull one side down and blend it. Next, I'm using the darker color of the pinks, which is the Taffy. That's my middle color. And you also see that I'm using the blending brushes from Simon Says Stamps. I really like them because they've got a couple of each color. You'll see I've got a light and a dark pink, and there's also a light dark blue. It's really nice to have the lights and the darks. It saves from having to clean so many of the brushes. So I've used my light. I've gone back in with a little bit more of the Taffy just to blend things out. And there's my pretty background. I'm going to create a little snowbank. And I love using these dies. These are also from Simon. And they're called Stitched Slopes and Hills dies. A tip, don't cut them apart. I did with this one particular one for a project I was working on. I really wish I hadn't. So pop it into your die cutting machine, run it through, and again I'm using hammer mill. So hammer mill is really, really white cardstock, so I find I use it for everything. That way I'm not second guessing myself as to what I'm working on, and it works awesome for ink blending as well as copic coloring. It's perfect for die cutting. It's the perfect weight, and it just saves you having all different kinds of white cardstock in your stash. Okay, so we're going with the top folding A2. So 4 1/4 by 11, and I've scored it at 5 1/2. Right now I am dry fitting all my pieces onto my card front to make sure that I like it. Got my little snowbank there, and now I'm going to audition a couple of sentiments and see which one I think might fit down the bottom. I got Let It Snow is kind of the one I'm looking at. So I need to attach my snowbank. The easiest way to do this is exactly what I'm doing. Flip it over, make a pencil line on the back, add your adhesive inside that pencil line. And I run out of adhesive right about there. Have to get another one, finish off my adhesive, and then I'm going to pop the card front on top of this. I got my pencil lines to line it up. And then just take a really nice sharp pair of scissors. From the back, you want to cut off the excess, and that gives you a nice finished front. Okay, so there's my card front, there's my card base. We need to put these two together. First, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. So again, I'm going to dry fit my pieces in there. I'm going to get the sentiment out that I like, and I'm putting it in my snowbank, and it looks like it's going to be a little bit squishy. So I've decided I'm going to put it up into the sky. So I'm going to make sure that I've got enough room for my trees. Okay, still like where it is, straightening it out a little bit. And so closing my MISTI to attach it to the lid. And then my favorite ink for black is the VersaFine Clair. This is the Nocturne Black ink. And this stuff is amazing. You only ever have to stamp it once, and it's the blackest ink I've ever found. It's perfect for doing sentiments. Okay, so add some adhesive to the back of the card front. We're going to attach it to the center of the card base. There should be about 1/4 of an inch frame around. And then I'm going to use foam squares, and I'm going to start attaching my little guys. And some of the foam squares I cut in half just to fit on the back of the trees. But I like the dimension of having them popped up a little bit. I think it adds a little bit interest to the card. Got my little snowman there. I'm going to put my second tree in first, making sure that I've kind of framed both sides of my little snowman, but it's not getting in the way of the sentiment. Okay. There we go. Here's a quick way to add some dimension to your card. Just take your C1 and your C3 and add a little shadow underneath your little snowman, and then blend it out with the C1. This is a quick, easy way to add dimension to your card. All right, I decide I need some gems. So I'm going through my stash of all kinds of different sequins from Simon Says Stamps, and I decide on the Rainbow Party sequins. I start with those great big honking ones. I decide I don't like them, and then I find those little tiny silver sequins, and I put them all over the front of the card. I'm using my Barely Art glue, and I'm going to attach them all. And I'll spare you having to glue every one of those down. Here's my finished card. Isn't it cute? Love that background. Okay, next up we're going to play with the embossing folder. I love this thing. So I have another piece of hammer mill, and I'm going to use my spritzer and get it all wet. If you do this on these thick embossing folders, you'll get a deeper impression. So the sandwich is just the base plate and then the metal plate. You don't need any of your plastic plates because the embossing folder is so thick. And see how deep I got that embossing by using wet paper? And it only takes a few minutes to dry. And if you're in a hurry, just use your heat tool. Okay, while we're making a mess, I'm going to white heat emboss a sentiment onto a scrap of black because I want that for my card. So I'm using Versamark. And you see I stamp it twice. It's because this is a new stamp. So I want to make sure that I'm getting a good solid image. And I'm covering it with a white embossing pad, or shaking off the excess and heating it. And then I am going to cut it with a circle thin wafer die, also from Simon Says Stamps. And right here you see I'm using a little towel to remove any of the chalk that I got from my anti-static. And then we're just going to quickly die cut that little guy. My card base is 5.5 by 8.5. I'm scoring it and folding it at 4 1/4. So this is going to have a top fold. And then I'm going to attach the piece that we embossed, and it got wet and now it's warped. So you need strong tape. So you can either use Terran tape or the red line. I really like Terran tape. It's really easy to use, but it's really nice and strong. So put lots on the back, and you want to burnish the end that you're going to be pulling the protective cover from. That just helps it come up easier. And then I turn it the other way, and I add 3 strips on the other side as well. And next up, I'm going to show you a trick on getting that on perfectly straight onto your card base. Get your MISTI out. Okay, again, I'm just burnishing my pieces. Take your foam and your paper out of your MISTI, put your card base in the top left-hand corner, squaring up that corner, and then just pop your front on just like that. Nice and even. You get a nice little edge from the MISTI to use to butt up against to make sure that you get it in there straight. Okay, so now we're going to addition all the little pieces, and I picked 3 of the snowmen for this one and 2 Christmas trees, and the parcels, which I also colored with the same colors. So I'm kind of going all the way across. I like the white background with all of this color going on. And so by embossing it, it adds a little bit more interest to your card, but you don't add a whole bunch of color or a whole bunch of layering of different things. So again, I'm just using foam squares, attaching all my little pieces. Need a couple more for my presents. That's a nice burst of color over there on the left-hand side. So I'm putting them just in front of the tree. And then I'm adding my sentiment also with foam squares right after I put the second little tree in behind those two. And there we go. There's another card finished. So all the details and links to all the products that I used are underneath this video, but they're also over on my blog, and there is a link to my blog post right underneath this video. So from the kit, I've decided to use the pink self-adhesive gems that came in the kit, and these are from Hampton Arts Studio G, and I think that nicely finishes the card. Okay, so we're back to that card front that we made right at the beginning of the video. It's now dry. Again, it was warped, so I'm using the tear and tape because it's stronger. And I'm turning it over, and I've decided I'm going to put a big tree and a snowman. And I got the snowy greetings. And I'm thinking that I need a winter birthday card. So I'm thinking that background is a little bit too busy. I decide to cut an oval out. So Simon Says stamps ovals, stitch ovals is what they're called. And I use it just to set off this card. And then some sequins added to the back, and you can make a Christmas card by adding the parcels if you want to, and changing the sentiment. Here's the fourth card I was talking about, where I took her and I used the slopes again to create another snowbank, the pattern paper in the background, and just one tree. Here you go. Here's all 4 cards. And again, there's close-up pictures of each of the cards over on my blog. And I hope you will subscribe and give me a thumbs up for today's video. Until next time, toodles!